And we're live. Hello, and welcome to our virtual presentation of While Tongues Can't Be Tamed, 15 Voices from the Latinx Diaspora. We are here with the anthology editor, Saraciea J. Fennell, along with contributors Lilliam Rivera, Mark Oshiro, and Ingrid Rojas Contreras. We will be doing an audience Q&A towards the end of the event. So if you have a question, just use the Ask a Question button at the very bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like, and they'll make their way to the top of the list. Also, if you would like to purchase a copy of While Tongues Can't Be Tamed tonight, click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen. Yes, Mark is pointing towards it. And it'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Again, it's the holiday season. You would like to do your holiday shopping early. So While Tongues Can't Be Tamed would be a great present. All right, so let me introduce our guests and then we can get started. So Saraciea J. Fennell is a Black Honduran writer and the founder of the Bronx Is Reading. She is also a book publicist who has worked with many award-winning and New York Times bestselling authors. She sits on the board for Latinx in Publishing, as well as on the advisory board of People of Color in Publishing. And joining her tonight is Lilliam Rivera, who is an award-winning author of Never Look Back, We Light Up the Sky, Dealing in Dreams, The Education of Margot Sanchez, as well as the Goldie Vance series for the middle grade readers. Mark Oshiro is the award-winning author of the young adult book Anger is a Gift, and Each of Us a Dessert, and Each of Us a Desert. Wow, okay. And their middle grade debut, The Insiders, with HarperCollins. They are also the co-author with Rick Riordan of the upcoming Percy Jackson novel. And last but not least, Ingrid Rojas Contreras' debut novel, Fruit of the Drunken Tree, was a silver medal winner in First Fiction from the California Book Awards. Her essays and short stories have appeared in the New York Times Magazine, New York Times, BuzzFeed, Nylon, and many more. So with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off and turn things over to our guests. Enjoy the talk, everyone.
Yay! Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Vroman for hosting us. I am so excited to talk to all of you. But before I dive in, I'm going to go off of the title of Mark's book.
I was so hungry, I didn't even notice it. I was like, yeah, I want dessert right now.
Well, I want to know now, like, what dessert would you be? I think that I would be fried ice cream because I love ice cream, so I feel like that would be my dessert. What about y'all?
My favorite. My favorite. I love key lime pie. I love it.
Key lime
one
pie.
of the best things in the world. So I'm going to choose key lime pie. Second place, though, would be, and Lilliam, do you drink coffee, Lilliam?
I don't, but yes.
Oh, okay.
What?
There is a coffee shop in Charleston that does a sweet potato pie latte. And it is the most delicious thing in the world.
Wow.
And I'm in Charleston this weekend, and I'm very excited to have 7,000 of them with my friend Justin Reynolds.
I might have to try that.
That's all we live on when we're at Yo Fest. It's just that one latte.
It's okay, so delicious.
Mine is gonna be easy because it's coquito. I mean, yeah. It's just a drink. So let's go. Merry
so
Christmas.
Good, so creamy, yeah.
I don't really like sweet things too much, but my favorite dessert. It's more of it's a whole plantain that's fried, and then you melt cheese in the middle, and then you put guava.
Oh my God.
Yes.
That sounds good.
That is the way to my heart. Honestly, you do not want to know. Like, I will figure out how to make any meal include cheese and it's ridiculous.
It's the best. It's like salty. It's like the cheese is a little bit salty. It's fried.
Yes.
Fried plantain. It has guava jelly. Oh, it's so delicious.
So good. I love this. I'm sorry for all of you tuning in. I probably made you hungry with this question, but that is okay. So we're gonna talk about this wonderful book, While Tongues Can't Be Tamed, and the first thing I want to talk about is What was your reaction when I invited you? I feel like I reached out at various different points to people at different times in their lives when they were like promoting different works and probably weren't sure if they could actually contribute to something like this. So what was the immediate thought when you got that email from me inviting you to contribute? Or if it came through your agent? I know for some people it came through your agent. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Well, whenever someone asks me to be a part of an anthology, I always think about like how, what kind of writing I can do. Like to me, it's a challenge in a lot of ways, because I'm just like, I don't write nonfiction that much, and if I do, it's hard for me to do so. Like I find it to be it's by far the hardest thing I could write. Is, I'll write, let me write genre, let me write a fantasy world. But when, fiction is my way of writing through trauma, of writing towards it, And so when someone asks me to write something that's personal, I'm just like, okay, am I ready emotionally to take the challenge, And so the importance of this anthology was like, it wasn't even like, should I do it because of the anthology? It's like, do I have the emotional heart to do it and to do it the right way? Because I don't want to just half-ass anything. I want to be able to like give an essay that makes sense and that pushes me to uncover something new for myself, right? So that's really how I felt when I got your email. I was just like, am I ready to go into that?
Yeah.
And I was, and I'm glad I did, because I felt like it's important to be part of that conversation. And I feel like this anthology is going to just really open up those kind of different conversations that we can have.
I love that answer too, because I think lots of writers nowadays, like anthologies, I feel like are always happening. It's like an evergreen thing. I hope they never go away, honestly. And I feel like most people do kind of weigh it. They're like, okay, do I have time in my writing schedule, in my personal life to even sign on to this project? I think is normally the first thing they ask themselves. But I love how you were like, okay, do I have the emotional capacity to actually, write about something and do it in a meaningful way? So I love that and appreciate it. Ingrid, Mark, what about you two?
I had similar thoughts. I think I was in the middle of writing my memoir, so I was already kind of like putting out a lot of nonfiction, and I don't know what's happened, but I'm usually a person who just prefers fiction, and then ever since writing the memoir, I just keep being surprised that I keep wanting to do it, because every time that I do it, I'm like, this is horrible like process. It's so much easier to just write fiction. But I think for me, I was so excited about just being part of a Latinx anthology, specifically in the way that you were doing it, which I thought was so thoughtful and so caring, and I just really wanted to be a part of it. But I wanted to make time for it, and I figured it out.
Yeah. And I remember you were already in the nonfiction space when we were chatting, and you had so many wonderful pitch ideas. I was like, oh, but this could equally be good and work for the anthology and that one too. And I remember we were going back and forth like, but what about this? What about that? Yeah. So I definitely think you have a talent for nonfiction. So I'm not even surprised, that you're kind of like interested in possibly writing more. And I'm so excited for your memoir. I can't wait to read it. And Mark, what about you?
So yesterday, or whenever we last had an event, I don't remember. Time is an illusion. It doesn't matter. But I had managed to track down when we were doing the official stuff about like the pitch and what it would actually be. Like it was around when like the agreement came in or whatever. But if I remember correctly, you asked me in person.
I did. I mentioned it to you in person.
Excuse me. And I also remember you were very explicit about like, you have a story being a transracial adoptee and being Latino that is so different and unique from everyone else's perspective that I need you to be in this. And
I did kind of say that. I was like, but Mark.
There was no, will you be in this? Oh, I think it was like, you just need to be in this. And I was like, yeah, okay. But my big thing, and as we went back and forth on the pitch too, was that I had spent a lot of time, I spent the last, 12 years of my life running these websites called Mark Reads and Mark Watches, where I reviewed books and TV shows. And I was very personal on a lot of them and wrote these sort of autobiographical things about myself in order to engage with fiction. And so my big thing was, how do I talk about myself in a way that's new? And that is actually how I came up with the whole device of, I was going to write a second person essay that is also nonfiction, but is second person at the same time. Is I knew that there was an element of looking back on myself that I felt would be particularly interesting to kids. And sort of how do you write something nonfiction as an adult, but still make it geared towards teenagers? And I thought the easiest way to do that was to basically speak to myself as someone growing up. And so, yeah, the initial response was, oh yeah, of course I'll do this. Yeah. And then it was, oh wait, what do I do? Like, how do I do this? And how do I pull it off in a way that feels me, but is also challenging and then is also unique? And so I think my response to it changed over time, because I think it became a lot harder. And then when I started writing it, I was like, what am I doing? This is so weird. No one's going to read this. Like, that whole process you go through when you think your idea is, you realize your idea is a lot harder to pull off in reality than it is, in your mind. But I'm glad I did it. And I'm glad, I said this before too, I'm glad that you were able to pull more threads out of that story and have me figure out the connective tissue between some of these sort of vignettes of different periods of my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for myself, this is hilarious. So the anthology had sold, and I was already going to be working with all of these wonderful contributors. And I remember the editors at Flatiron asked me, they were like, this is so great, but Saraciea, are we going to get an essay from you? And I was like, I don't know. Like, are you? I knew definitely that I wanted to write something, but for throughout the whole entire editorial process, I focused on everyone else and poured into everyone else, and that brought me so much joy. But when it came for me to focus on myself, I'm gonna go back to what Lilliam said. The emotional capacity. Do I have the emotional capacity to go into my memory bank and pull out something that I want to write about?
Right.
And it is hard when you are writing nonfiction, because it's your life, and these are real people who you either have to like see in your everyday, or they're within your ecosystem. So it might get back to them that you wrote about them and you painted them as like this really terrible person. And I'm just fascinated with memory in that way, because people will think, I didn't treat you that way, or I didn't say that thing like that, I didn't mean it that way. And it's like, but this is how I received it, and this was the experience, whether you meant it that way or not. And so, recently for me, I wrote this essay. It's out in the world. I have family members that are reading it. And, a few elders in my family and some of my older cousins are like, that thing that you wrote about never happened before. Like, I don't know, you're misremembering. That's not a thing that happened. You're making this up. It's all lies. And I'm like, no, it did happen. And then, I have other people who it also happened to. So, for example, colorism, talking about hair, excuse me, using bleaching cream, like these were things that the darker skinned people in my family experienced. Whether it was like the bleaching cream or the way we wore our hair, it was always like, put your hair in a ponytail, you can't have it wild. And it's like, what is wild? Like, my hair is just out in its natural state. Why are you calling it wild? Let's, let it be free is the better term. But, so I was talking to family recently, and I'm like, okay, so you don't remember this? Let me phone a friend, or rather phone a cousin, and pop them on, and I'm like, do you remember? And they're like, absolutely, yes, I do remember, and here's how it happened, and here was the date. Like, their memory was real sharp, and I'm like, this is amazing, because sometimes you remember things fuzzy, but you'll never forget how someone made you feel. And so I think in each of your essays, you have these very distinct people who have impacted your lives, and they made you feel a certain way. And so I'm wondering, for you, during your writing process, when you were thinking about those moments, did it come to you right away and you were like, I remember vividly how this person made me feel. I remember vividly how they cared for me, or vividly, how they made me feel othered, whatever it is, because all of your essays are tackling different things. I'm wondering, how did you process that, and how did you accomplish expressing those emotions on the page? Because I think for me, I didn't think I did it justice, but now that family has read it, I'm like, oh, I did it justice, because it's made them uncomfortable, and I'm like, this was the perfect level of me talking about this that would actually get the point across. And I wasn't sure, honestly, I wasn't quite sure. I was like, I don't know, I gotta have, once it's out there and people are reading it, then I'll know if I actually captured the memory correctly. And now that it's in their hands, I'm like, I did it. I did capture it correctly. So Ingrid, let's start with you, because I feel like you there was so much tension in the relationship with your partner's family, and you talk extensively in your essay about how those challenge points were, and like you trying to explain to them, and it's still not resonating. It's like going over their head. So I would love for us to start with you.
Sure. Like what I was thinking about when I was writing the essay was just how when you're a person of color in relationship with someone who is either like a white family or someone who has like those kinds of conservative or like supremacist views, how complicated that can be. Because I think there is a pressure that you receive from people outside to make it work, or to just like, you're the one supposed to change their minds, or you're the one supposed to be educating them and then turning that into a liberal book or whatever. So I think that the reason why the essay was very satisfying to write was because I had spent like a decade of receiving that kind of pressure. And then when I tried to talk to them about, tried to demystify what some of their actions and what they would meant to me. And I feel like nobody could, well, they certainly did not validate what I was saying. And nobody else could tell me that what was happening. And so I felt like for a decade, I almost had like the thought that I was just making the whole thing up. I had the thought of just being like, I must be like reading into things, or I must be like not understanding what's happening. So I think that there was a moment of clarity, and it's the last moment in the essay. And I think after that moment of clarity, I think that's when I knew that I could write about them. Because everything before, I just wasn't sure actually if they were the aggressor or not, or if I was making things up. And then once I think my process, like even when I'm writing about someone, like they did me wrong, I always try to be as kind and as compassionate as possible as I can to them, without that changing anything, right? So I'm still not gonna change my story of like, you did something to me, but I'm still gonna try to be as generous as I can within that. So I think that's how I was navigating, trying to do honor to the story by telling what happened specifically. Trying to kind of come up with moments that did get across kind of the troubled waters of what was happening in the relationship, which there was a lot of like racist, in the end, like white supremacist things happening. And once I got there, I think the first draft that I wrote was probably very angry draft. And then in subsequent drafts, I try to be more neutral, and I try to kind of, go back and then be generous. And there's something about writing through an experience that way, like it actually, the words kind of like do change you. Like there is kind of like a space that then opens. So
yeah. Absolutely. I agree. Yes. The through the drafts, we could see you being generous, because there were some points where I was like, no, we should leave this exactly the tone that it is. But then, once we edited it, I was like, okay, yeah, that does make more sense.
But it was cathartic for everyone.
Exactly. Lilliam, what about you?
Well, because my essay was writing about a dark period of my time, my first year of college for the most part was when I had like a moment when I really wanted to end my life. And so to write about that is, I don't think I've ever really told anyone except for my friend who saved me in a way, that day. So I haven't really spoken to anyone about that. I've spoken very open, I'm very open about my anxiety. I'm very open about depression, about my drinking and all that, being sober. But so I don't know how I feel. I still feel really vulnerable having it out there, like, to be honest. Even I think when you asked us if we were Flatiron asked about doing the audio book or reading your essay for the audiobook version. And I remember just, if you hear my voice is trembling throughout reading it, because it was just such a hard thing for me to even go there, to rehash it in a lot of ways. But I mean, cathartic, all I keep thinking in my head is that I want to be honest, and I want all these other young people who are even dealing with half of anything that I had to deal with back then, that they too can find some sort of salvation, whether that's in, therapy, whether that's in medication, whether that's in church. Maybe it's a combination of all of those things, that there is hope, that you don't have to be in the dark all that time. And so I guess that was really what I was striving for as I was writing it, even as I was editing, with fear, because I do have fear, So it was just like that. At the end, there's hope. At the end, that I am proof of it. That there is hope, that I could find ways of being able to cope with the things that I cope with. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think even the way that your essay is structured, right? Like you are talking about these moments, these tough moments that happened to you while you were in college. But as you go through the essay, it's like I'm there with you, walking through as you find the courage to, like, move forward, to get through those hurdles. And, I don't want to say it's like a whimsical essay, because it's not, but like just the language that's used, I felt a lot of whimsy in it, where I'm like, okay, I'm walking with Lilliam through this path, and we're walking through this tunnel, and let's see what is on the other side. And I thought that was really, really powerful. And listen, I hear you. I'm still like, how many more family members are going to read this essay? And like, and the thing is, it's like I didn't go as deep into some of the other horror stories that I have about my childhood. And a few of my, cousins were like, you wrote about just that one, those one or two lines. There's so much more. And I feel like people will probably see that with your essay as well, where they're like, okay, you wrote about this breakthrough moment for you where you decided to seek help, but you have countless other stories, after that, or even before you got to that moment. And so it's just very interesting. And Mark, I feel like your essay already takes takes us through that, because you give us many moments with many people who have made an impact in your life. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, because for an essay, you know, people are usually like, don't introduce, if it's fiction, don't introduce so many characters, because, you know, you want people to like really follow along in the story.
Right.
This is nonfiction, it's your life. And your vignettes, you know, I'm just gonna call them vignettes. They're not, I don't know
functionally what they are.
Okay, perfect. I feel like we get one memory vignette and it's like, boom, we're introduced to this one person who made you feel this way, and like they're nameless, right? It's just a waitress.
Or the teacher, like when in elementary school. And I don't even know that I remember her name either.
Well, you know what? Maybe they need to remain nameless.
Well, and it's interesting to say that too, because we sort of had the opposite thing where I feel like the draft got angrier and more emotional over time. It actually did. I left, and then we talked about this too. Like I left a lot of things out, and you could sense I was leaving them out. You were like, you jumped over. What happened here, Mark? What's going on here? I'm like, oh.
There was like a 5 or 6 year gap where we were all like, well, why did you skip over this?
And then once I filled them in, I think I was able to see a larger point to the whole piece as a whole, and talking about the journey with identity and being adopted and being raised in this very weird sort of mishmash of cultures. I'm actually interested to hear this from all of y'all too, because while the essay does talk a lot about feeling like an outsider and feeling like I don't fit in, there's only sort of brief little moments that reflect on something that I did experience that from doing these events I've been thinking about, which is how many people I knew growing up, and then also when I lived in New York, who were, you know, from the diaspora and just sort of welcomed you in with open arms, and they kind of didn't really care where you came from. Like I think about all the Mexican and Guatemalan and El Salvadorian kids who were like, oh, you're one of us, we don't care. Like, and how many of those kids affected my life as well. Or like when I remember moving to New York and going, I lived in Washington Heights, so everyone around me was Dominican. Going to the bodega, I'm looking at the menu and I'm just like, oh, quisiera, and I don't even get to finish. The guy's like, are you Dominican? And I was like, no. And he just goes, yeah, you're Dominican. And then just the entire time I lived in that neighborhood, he was like, hey, el Dominicano. And I'm like, no, I'm not, but okay. Like, and it was always this thing of love. He was always so excited to see me. It took me forever to understand what he was saying, because y'all don't use consonants at all. Like, it was so hard coming from like Southern California, Spanish, mostly from Central Americans, to come into New York. And I'm like, how do you speak so fast? I don't know what you're saying. But like, I think that sort of stuff didn't really have quite as much of a space in the essay, because I wanted to focus on the weirdness of identity and like how much not being able to choose where I came from or how I was, adopted into a family affected my view of myself, and how it affected other people's perception of me too. So all this is to say, I don't really care. I was like, every time you were like, put more in it, I'm like, who cares? I'm just going to do it. Like, and just put this person in here. I've made peace with some of those people. I do remember the boss, because there's a little vignette that was one of the newer ones that I added, where it was my learning the hard way that someone who might have the same skin color as you, who might be from the same community, actually doesn't care about you at all. And that was hard. And I didn't learn that lesson until I was 21 and had a manager who just was, we all know those people who like crave whiteness, and they want the validation and the love and the acceptance. And so they will throw anyone from their community under the bus to get it. And that was a boss I had. And so, a lot of them aren't named. So I felt a little safer to like throw them under the bus in a nationally printed book. But the ones where you could figure out who it was, I did talk to my brother. I have a twin brother, and I had lots of conversations about, do you remember this the same way? Do you think this is pretty accurate? And he was like, yep. I'll back you up if people say it's not true, but that's definitely how certain things happen. So that helped. I think that helped and gave me a little bit of freedom to feel okay with being vulnerable in the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you had like someone who essentially, you've mentioned this before, you know, the two of you felt like one unit because that's how everyone like kind of viewed you. And so
Yeah.
you're like, let me check with my other half, the other half of my
Might as
unit
well.
to make sure this is accurate. I love that. And now, you know, I quickly just want to talk about how each of us have sort of written nonfiction in some capacity or written, you know, short fiction or short work that has gotten placed in other places. I'm wondering, do you feel like that having that knowledge or those techniques made it a little bit easier for you to contribute to a piece like this, a collection like this, rather? I think for me, all of my short stories usually run longer. So I was actually like, I don't know how I'm going to end my essay. Was how like I think you can tell a little bit at the end. It's like, I'm just gonna summarize. Here's a paragraph summary of like, here's what I'm gonna do with my life now. Because I just really didn't know how to end. But I feel like, you know, Mark, your ending was like, you know, sort of figuring out like this is who I am, whether you like it or not. And then Ingrid, I feel like at the end of yours, it's like, it is what it is. This is what happened with our relationship, and this is where we are now. And the same thing with yours, Lilliam. Like, there's closure in each of all of your essays, but at the same time, there's still like room for more. Like, if you ever wanted to go in and expand your pieces. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be amazing. And I'm gonna like take some notes for myself.
I can start because I actually treated it like short fiction. So I figured out the ending like as early as possible, as like what's the emotional like endpoint I want to get to with this.
That's amazing.
And then wrote in that direction. And then also I knew I didn't want to just like, this is what happened. I didn't want to tell it like a normal story. So once I figured out like sort of the framing device and that it was going to be this like second person essay to a younger version of myself, you know, I treated it as much like a short story as I could. And so I think that's why it ended up in this sort of lyrical place, is because I didn't want to think of it as you were writing it, you know, you're writing a very true to life piece. You're writing this, I don't know, I just didn't want it to be dry. Not, you know, I didn't want to focus on it being very clinical and just like, let me just get all the details right and the chronological order right. And so, yeah, I didn't treat it any differently than I would when I was writing a short story.
You're also a plotter, so it makes sense that you already plotted the end.
Yeah, well, and if I'm being honest, I did plot the whole thing too. I actually wrote down like, age this is the story you want to include. So, you know, you do know me well.
Of course, Mark. Lilliam, Ingrid, what about the two of you?
You know what? I was thinking about, this is usually how I write nonfiction, is I try to think about what complicated question it's trying to solve or present. And the one for my essay was like, how can you be in relationship with someone who doesn't believe in your humanity? Or like, what does that look like? And then at which point does that break? And so I think for nonfiction, I sound out that question for myself, and I actually never write it into the essay, but I just kind of make it present with the situation. And then I do like to not plan anything. So I start with, the only plan is that I know what I'm asking, and then I just find my way through, and then I know that it's ended when I have come to an answer for it.
Yeah.
So that's how
I love that, having a question in mind. And actually, when you and I were talking about pitches, you mentioned that. I was like, yeah, it's usually so hard to like, you know, write essays, and you were like, well, you could string together a series of essays by answering one question, you know. So I think that's amazing. So shout out to all of the people tuning in. If you ever want to write essays or even short stories or etc., definitely start with a question and then kind of, you know, figuring out different ways to answer that question and having these short pieces, because I have that in my notes, my writing notes from Ingrid. I was like, ooh, this is amazing.
I know. I'm gonna take that. That's gonna be my next essay.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, that's really good. I don't. The weird thing is, this is my very horrible way of doing it, is that if someone asks me to write something personal, because I've only been asked to write personal stuff, I've never been voluntarily giving that up, and so it's always like, what skeleton do I want to take out from the closet and bring out to the world? Yeah. Honestly, is and am I ready to tackle that, that skeleton? So it's basically how I deal with, if I'm going to write an essay, what do I have to say that I haven't said that makes sense? Yeah.
I love that. Because essentially for me, I fully believe that if you are a writer, you have one essential question or one essential theme or themes that you're always incorporating into your work, whether you know it or not. And I think for me, I'm always writing about family in some capacity, Blackness and hair, and also the bathroom. Weirdly enough, when I was in my MFA program, every story had a bathroom scene, and I didn't realize that until another student pointed it out.
People using the bathroom,
not using the bathroom necessarily, but because I come from a large family, that is sort of where you get your sanctuary. We shared. I had 4 siblings in one room, and it's like, where do you go to be alone? You go to the bathroom. Because in the living room, there's always someone else there. In the kitchen, always someone else there. In your bedroom, always someone else there. But where can you go to be alone? It's the bathroom. Whether you just want a moment to cry, a moment to just sit and maybe send a private text message, or whisper on the phone. When you were a teenager like me, I would hide in the bathtub and close the curtain and be on the phone. And people are like, "Who's in the bathroom?" I'm like, "Hi, it's me. I was in there for 2 hours on the phone with my best friend, having a secret conversation that I didn't want my nosy sisters to hear." But I really truly believe that each writer, you may not know what it is, you may not see it in your work, but your readers will, and that's one of the things that I love about writing. And so with that, I'm wondering, what advice would you give to a writer who has experienced or is currently going through the thing that you wrote about in your essay? So I'll start, because I know it's a heavy question. So my essay, I talk about sort of my mom going through a rough patch and me ending up in foster care and sort of being in this whole new world where I'm surrounded by white people. And that's happened to me a couple of times in my lifetime, right? So that was the first instance, and I got a crash course on this is what it means to be around white people. And then as a young adult, when I was in college, I went away and got to live on campus, and I was surrounded by a lot of white people. And I was just fascinated by certain things that I knew how to do since I was 9. They were just starting to learn, whether it was cooking or going grocery shopping or doing laundry a certain way. I kind of reflected and looked back, everything I went through in my life with my family actually prepared me for this moment. And so I would like for the person who is like me, maybe you got taken away and you're in foster care, or your family couldn't take care of you and they put you in foster care, just know that those are life lessons that you're learning right now that will come in handy later. It's going to teach you how to adapt to people. It's going to teach you how to have patience. It's going to teach you so many different things, but it's also going to teach you how to appreciate, when you can find the people you want to be around and find the people who love you. And I think that's really important. And it gets better. That's the advice I'll say to you. It does get better. So just hang in there. But yeah. And also, if you have textured hair, tell people suck it. You can do whatever you want with your hair. You can dress however you want to dress. You don't have to use bleaching cream. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's your body. Okay, as long as you take care of yourself, it's all good. That's the advice that I would give to someone who would mirror what I went through in my essay. How about you, Ingrid?
I think that I would say, I think this applies to all kinds of toxic relationships, that you don't need to wait for anybody else to tell you that you're in a toxic relationship. Like, if you are starting to feel that it's happening, don't wait like 10 years. This is what I would say. Like, just don't wait 10 years. Like, it's not. If after 10 years you're still like, I think this is like abusive and like not good at all, then, you know, but I think that it can be very addictive when you're kind of being like, when people are calling into question like what you're seeing. It can be very addicting to then rely on other people to also verify whether what you're feeling is real or not. But I think in the end, what I learned is like, that's actually not true. That's just kind of like an effect of being in a toxic relationship. And the thing to realize is to just, I think that if I had, and I never did this, but writing the essay was very clarifying, because then putting all of the things together, I was like, oh yeah, this is so obvious, and I should have laughed a lot sooner. But I think that because I didn't take a moment to just kind of put everything down and look at it and be like, these are all the things that have been happening, that I just remained unsure. So maybe taking a moment, reflecting, and then, don't wait for anybody to validate. You can validate your own reality. You don't need anybody else to validate what you're going through.
That's so good, because I think that's really hard for you to do as an individual for yourself. It's really hard. Mark, do you want to go next?
My answer was frighteningly similar to Ingrid's, because I really think this idea of like, we're told such confusing things about our community and our identity growing up that I wish someone had just told me, you don't have to wait. Like, you don't have to wait to figure out who you are. You don't have to wait to figure out what terms to use. You don't have to wait to learn Spanish. You don't have to wait. All these things that I was just constantly told to wait for. So I would tell someone going through, similar things with, identity struggles, especially if you're adopted, is you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for your parents to catch up to you. You can go and do the research yourself. You can seek out your biological family, and your adoptive parents might feel some type of way about it, but that's what they signed up for. There is not a situation in which you should not be allowed to figure out where you came from and what your heritage is or your ancestry is. I wish I hadn't waited, because most of the people in my biological family have passed away now, so that I don't have that resource anymore. And if I hadn't waited, I maybe could have talked to some of them. And so I would say, that is especially applicable if you are queer as well, because that is a huge part of the essay that I wrote as well, is coming into that understanding of who I was and not being able to be free and not being able to express myself at all. It was a very stifling environment that I grew up in. And so I hope that message also applies too, that you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for other people to accept you or to validate you or to see you for who you are. You know who you are. And that self-validation is probably the most important part of it all.
Oh, I love that. Just so many gems tonight. And Lilliam, what about you?
I love that too. I mean, all these things are so good for just to remind me of what I have to do, when if that happens or when it happens.
Yeah.
I guess for me, the essay is really, it's not like a warning. It's just a reminder of how to take care of yourself, and that it's a constant thing that changes. Like I in the essay, I start off in college, but I progressively go, I go from like how I felt when I was a young kid and also all the way to when I had my own kids. And And I just, and it's just this idea of not taking care of yourself and how you allow that to just sort of accumulate until you can't do it anymore, until you don't see an exit, and you don't see hope, And so it's almost like a warning of like, don't do what I did and just really just allow yourself that opportunity to seek help. I mean, to me, that's like a big thing. And I want the stigma that is on our community, on the Latinx community about mental health. I just want that to be demolished, because it's not saving anyone. And there is no stigma when it comes to help, getting help. I mean, I'm like, therapy is like key for me, but also whatever else. I'm like always asking whoever, what are you doing? Does that help? Okay, I'm going to do that too. I'm open to like finding ways to make this life easier for me and to find joy. That's like so important. Like, I just want to find joy and peace. And I want that for anyone young and old. So I hope they get that from the essay.
I love that so much because we do go through a lot of stuff in our lives, but joy, like take the time to enjoy the moments of joy. I feel like, especially for our community and communities of color in general, we have so much going on and so many pressures on our shoulders that sometimes a beautiful thing could happen in our lives and we're like, that was cool, that was great. And like just spend like 5 minutes on it instead of like, no, I'm going to soak in this moment and like make it stretch. So I love that. Joy. Please focus on joy. We have about 10 minutes left, so I don't know if there are any audience questions. Feel free to drop those in. I don't see any yet. But in the meantime, since all of these topics that we wrote about included a lot of like challenge points from our lives, I'm wondering, what are some moments of joy from your childhood that you remember? I remember, one of the highlights from my essay was I always felt like an outsider. The title of my essay is Half In, Half Out, Orbiting a World Full of People of Color. But once I found the language, or rather the identity of what I was and where I came from, and I got to boast and tell other people, that's all I wanted to do. I'm like, go ahead, ask me the question that you're always asking. Like, ask it, because now I have an answer. And that brought me so much joy because I felt a sudden rush of pride. It was like, oh, I can actually answer this now. What about you guys? And it doesn't have to be from your essay. It can just be in general from your life growing up, or
mine will start from the essay and then continue on. But I actually think one of the like great parts I remember about growing up is, so after I was adopted, we lived in Boise, Idaho for a few years. 0 stars on Yelp. Don't recommend it. It was terrible. To give you some context, the school I went to was a kindergarten through 8th grade school. So it was elementary and middle school all in one building. And there was me and my twin brother, so these brown kids with black hair, jet black hair, which there was no one with black hair, except for there was a black girl 1 grade ahead of us. And then there was like a Southeast Asian kid who was like in 6th grade. That's it. There were no other people of color in the school. So part of what is I have found over the years is such like a vital part of the culture that I didn't get initially was just food. I didn't even know there was a specific type of food for any of our culture. Even just do very general, just Latinx culture in general. I didn't know that there were food types. I didn't know there were any of this stuff. And so I have that point where I very briefly mentioned like having like beans and rice for the first time at this Mexican restaurant in Adelanto, California on the way to moving, and just being like, what is this? Why does it taste like this? It's so good. This is amazing. So I have very fond memories of discovering, and it was, Americanized from immigrants, Mexican food, but just discovering it as a kid and just being like, how is all of this so good? And so I have a very fondness for that very specific type of like Southern Californian Mexican food. particularly the stuff that, you know, was from like the Sonoran or from Sonora. So you're getting stuff from like northern Mexico that's making it over. So like I'm very particular about tacos. Very, very particular. Like they have to be made like sort of a specific way. And most places in the United States don't make them that way. Like it's a California, well, I wouldn't say California, it's a throughout the Southwest. Because I've had very similar types of tacos in like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Oh my God. Mexican food in Texas is amazing. And so I have a lot of very fond memories about getting to try things for the first time. And it's amazing. It's an amazing thing because I have a unique perspective on it, which is when you're not raised with it and then you get to have it for the first time. And it's great. I love it. I love that part about like getting the surprise and getting to understand flavors. And sometimes you eat food and you understand a whole cultural thing that you didn't understand before. Like and for example, moving to New York and having Dominican food everywhere and having, you know, mango for the first time and having oh my God, I'm trying to think. There's this place up on 190th in Dykeman that is like one of the most famous Dominican restaurants. And I think I lived there. I just was like, and that was as an adult. Like, here's this type of food I've never had. And getting to have it regularly was just such a joy. So, so yeah, my answer is food.
I love that. I love that. Lilliam, Ingrid?
I always really liked New Year's with my family. Yeah, because we did. I just loved, you know, this was like in Colombia, and we went to like the northeastern part of Colombia, and I just remember that even as a kid, we would just stay up like way, and you know, we never had bedtimes, but we would be kind of like up and dancing until like 5, and like just like you never, you know, as a kid, you just never. And it would just always end with me and my cousins just passing out from being completely tired. Like we're trying to stay awake because the adults are still dancing and drinking, and we would like want to see. But
yes,
kind of like in the staircase, just like trying to stay awake, and then you know, falling asleep wherever. And you know, there were like fireworks. And then it was also by like this mountain that was full of kind of like a coffee jungle. And my uncles would always, whenever it was midnight, they would like shoot toward just as fireworks, because we had very few fireworks. And so then that was like the version of celebration. And it just all felt like so wild and so much fun. And it was just, yeah, I love that. And then all my aunts are like, you're not moving your hips right. Like, you know, it's just like the most serious thing. Like if you don't know how to properly like
you're like getting dance lessons in the middle of everything. They're like, if you're going to do it right.
Yeah. And it's super urgent the way that you're taught. So I think I love those. That's probably my favorite childhood memory.
I love that. Lilliam?
I love that memory too. I mean, I feel like we can all relate to that. Like for me, it's always my family. They all live in the same neighborhood in the Bronx. They all live walking distance to me. So, you know, although I have you know, distance is great for my mental health, but I do love when I connect with them. I do love reconnecting. There's something really kind of amazing when you're just like, immediately when you see a cousin and you're just right back to bragging on each other and dissing, like it does not, like I am back to that age, you know. I mean, they used to call me cousin it because my hair was always super long and in my face, and now they still call me like I am a grown woman with kids, and they say, yo, cousin it, what's up, you know. And I'm like, oh my God, I love it, bro. You know, because it puts you right back in place. Like, girl, so what if you're in Hollywood? It doesn't matter. Because of it. So I love that, you know. So, and I see them, like I see like this Instagram stuff. Like my whole family went to a salsa cruise the other day. I'm like, they don't stop, you know. And so it's just like I'm in awe of them. Like that's family, you know.
I love that. I love that. Well, we have 2 questions from to answer. So, how did you come up with the title "Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed"? I mentioned this in the introduction of the anthology, but it was inspired by Borderlands, and I have to give all the credit to my agent Patrice Caldwell. You know, we were constantly talking about like, this is what we want the anthology to be, but we can't figure out a title. And she's like, you know what? I feel like it matches the tone of this. And I was like, I think that's it. And I think Mark was actually in, we were in the same, where were we? Virginia? I don't know. We were somewhere in a writer's retreat, and it just hit.
We were not in Virginia. We have never been in Virginia.
Yes,
together. We were in we were in either Pennsylvania or upstate. We're the Poconos.
Maybe it was the Poconos. We were in a beautiful house writing. That's all I remember. Who cares about the real location?
Wait.
But I
you
remember.
were right.
It was
hurricane.
Virginia.
It was the hurricane house. I forgot about the hurricane house.
Yes. See,
it was the hurricane house.
My memory. Sometimes it's right, y'all. Sometimes
it was right. I forgot. We literally were in Virginia. Oh God, that was real quick. That was where there was literally a hurricane coming. And if Tiffany Jackson wasn't there, I would have still been in that house in hurricane because I'd never been in one, and I didn't know you have to leave. And she was like, "You need to like rebook your flight now." And I was like, "It'll be fine. Like it's not gonna hit here." Y'all, I would have been dead if it wasn't for Tiffany Jackson.
We were pretty close to the beach too, so it would have been bad.
I did not make a difference. Anyway.
But yes, shout out to my agent Patrice for summarizing it, because I was like, I don't know what title to come up with. But the subtitle, 15 voices from the Latinx diaspora, it was important that I include diaspora because I felt like that word alone shatters what you think a Latinx person looks like. And so that was really important to me, because I feel like, you know, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff that you normally don't even get to see in the media. And that, I think that was amazing. The last question here is, this anthology is technically young adult, but what do you hope older Latino and Latinx readers will take away from reading it? I love this question because after rereading this entire collection, I feel like there are lots of essays that are perfect for the college age person. So like I don't know, what do they call that category? New adult, maybe? I don't really know. Saying new adult sounds so weird to me, but it's like that 17 to 21-year-old range. Obviously, I think this is totally a book that everyone, should read and pick up. But I feel like those people who are sort of like, okay, I'm trying to figure out life for myself, and like you've been empowered to take the reins and go on. So that's my thinking, but I would love to hear from y'all what y'all think. If you have any additional thoughts, but that was always my goal. I was like, this is going to be a perfect crossover collection, both for teens and older people. I think they all agree with me.
I would just add, I hope it makes people question. I would just love it if they, and maybe that's an uncomfortable position to be in, or like an uncomfortable state to be in, but I would love if people read the anthology and felt like they could revisit things from their past and question what they perceived or what they did or how they actually felt, or even better, like, did you know, because I think we've all talked about this in a weird way of saying, like, we almost second guess the things we went through because we were told, like, so many times that this isn't what actually happened when it was. And they learned to, you know, trust their instincts, that their instincts were right the first time
around.
Oh no. Did you guys want to finish answering that question, or are we good? All right. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This was such a lovely conversation. I felt like I learned a lot, and I really hope that you guys did as well. If you would like to purchase a copy of the book, just click on the green purchase button. It will take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Also, for those of you who tuned in late, don't worry, a replay of this talk will be available once the broadcast ends. But a round of virtual applause for our guests. They were amazing. So have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. And I guess happy early holidays. Right.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.